Our next episode is Deja Q, and this is episode number 61 of Star Trek The Next Generation. It originally aired on February 3rd, 1990. It was written by Richard Dennis and directed by Les Landau. Now, the episode begins with the crew of the Enterprise attempting to help Braille 4, and the planet's moon has lost its orbital velocity and threatens to smash into the planet. And suddenly, Q appears, as you can see in this picture, in the nude, and claims that the other members of the Q Continuum not only kicked him out, but stripped him of his powers this time. And since he was no longer all-powerful and eternal, the Continuum allowed him to choose the form he would take for the rest of his life, and in the few seconds that he had, Q chose to become human. Now, skeptical of Q's claims, Picard orders Worf to take Q to the brig, and Picard suspects Q of orchestrating the coming disaster of Braille 4. Now, the crew continues to work on the problem of the moon, and they have to assume that Q is telling the truth, even though they seriously doubt it. Q convinces Picard that he can help, though, and even though he no longer has his powers, he does possess knowledge. So Picard acquiesces and releases Q from his cell, and charges Data to accompany Q for the rest of his stay on the Enterprise. Now, meanwhile, a cloud of ionized gas approaches the ship, and it's the Calamarain, who are just one of the many species that Q has tormented over the centuries. And having come for revenge, Picard realizes that Q's real motive for choosing to be human is that he knew Picard would protect him. Although Q claims that to be a weakness of the human species, Picard maintains that it's one of their strengths. Now, with Q's help, LaForge and Data invent a plan to push the moon back to its original orbit, and during the attempt, the Calamarain attack and almost rip Q away from the ship. Now, Data saves him, but is injured in the process. As Q reflects on this and Data's selfless act, Q realizes he makes a worthless human being, and he decides to end it all and leaves the Enterprise in a shuttle so the Calamarain can kill him. Now, on the shuttle, another member of the Q Continuum, which in the credits is labeled as Q2, he appears and talks with Q about the real reason Q left the ship. He knew the Calamarain would eventually destroy the Enterprise to get to him, and for Q's selfless act, he receives his powers back. And, of course, Q is delighted by this, and his first impulse is to attack back at the Calamarain, but Q2 reminds him that he's still watching, so Q lets them go, and as a parting gift, basically, Q wants to celebrate with the bridge crew, and he even gives cigars and women for the crew and a mariachi band, but Picard orders that they take this away, and Q leaves Data with a parting gift by letting him have a good old-fashioned belly laugh, which is amusing to the rest of the crew, and for Data, a great feeling. And as one more gift, Q actually corrects the moon's orbit. And Picard says, well, perhaps there is a shred of humanity left in Q after all. And as they close, and Picard is about to say his famous lines of engage, he suddenly has a cigar in his hand, and the Q saying, "Don't bet on it, Picard." And that is the end of the episode. Now, this is the fourth time we have seen John Delancey guest star on Star Trek The Next Generation as Q, and he really does bring a lot. Of course, this is an exceptional part, being an omnipotent creature, but even with the pilot episode Encounter at Farpoint, he brought a big presence to that role, and as a result of that, he's become a big fan favorite on Star Trek The Next Generation, and certainly one of my favorite characters. Just the way Delancey portrays him and does a great job with it. And I think you can really start to see here a change in the Q character a little bit here too. In the pilot episode, he's really just I don't know, he's a force to be reckoned with, and not really one with a sense of humor necessarily, but somebody who's just going to test the Enterprise, and he puts them on trial for humanity, of course. And Picard and the crew are able to show that they have progressed. But then Q the Q Continuum themselves, they start to show interest in humanity, and Q especially, in the Enterprise and Picard in particular. And you start to see this great interaction, really, with Patrick Stewart and John Delancey as the episodes progress here. And I would say this is probably the one that's the most comedic up to this point out of the ones we've seen so far. I think the next time we see Q, that's even taken even further. But this one, there's no Borg to be dealing with. There's nobody who dies. This one is purely just examining Q and his relationship being a human. Now, originally with this episode, the original idea was that the Klingons were going to be coming to war soon with the Federation. And Q claims to have lost his powers, but it turns out he hasn't lost his powers at all, and he was just playing with us and pulling our strings so he could make himself a hero and become an officer and prove that he's valuable, kind of like Q Who, where he was trying to become a member of the crew. And it wasn't a bad story, but they took it to Gene Roddenberry, and Gene basically said, if you're going to do a story godlike and brought down to earth, then do it. So Gene preferred more of a straightforward approach where Q could really truly explore what it's like to be human. And as a result, from here on out, I think he becomes more of a mischievous character rather than somebody who's trying to threaten the lives of people. Although sometimes he still does. There are a few exceptions to that, but he definitely, I think, in his eyes, in relation to the Enterprise and Picard, he almost thinks of them as buddies, even though Picard doesn't necessarily share that same feeling. There is a big change, I think, in starting with this episode. And I think a lot of it has to do with his gratitude towards Mr. Data, and then Q reciprocating with sacrificing himself. So, big change there. I liked this episode, obviously. Hope you guys did too. Even if you're not a big fan of Q, I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you guys next time.